Pascal, thank you very much for joining us here at the Rio Conventions TV studio. Mobility is so important. We can see this in Rio on our visits to the Rio Centro and to the Pavilion here. It can take such a long time. But for you, I understand you feel it's more than just a case of getting from A to B. It is, in a sense, a human right.
Yeah, you're right. The work that we have been doing for more than 12 years now with IVM is just to strengthen the fact that mobility is now a right. It's the access to education, the access to healthcare, to employment. So it's clearly a right, a human right, and we are devoted to work on that right everywhere in the world. So we have 3 locations for IVM. Latin America, with an office in Buenos Aires, also in Europe, in Paris, but also in Shanghai, where we are working on the whole China on mobility issues.
Tell me a bit about the work you do in Shanghai, because I've been there. It's a fun city. In a sense, it's a crazy city too, because there is so much development, so many people coming into the city all the time. That must mean it is a fascinating place to work.
Shanghai is a fascinating place to work, but what we want to do with IVM is to run projects that are very specific, very narrow. In fact, we want to gather academics. We want to have also involve local business representatives, local authorities, and we want to look at specific mobilities in certain areas. We are not dealing with global plan for improving mobility. We have worked, for instance, on the mobility of blind people and also on preteens in rural areas in France. And so we try to understand why people have to move from A to B and how we can make them more autonomous and that they can move also more safely in the cities, in rural areas. So we want to not take mobility as a system, as all the transport engineers are already talking about mobilities, but we look at people. We want to understand why they want to move, especially for here in Rio in the favelas. We are very interested in understanding why women are moving and how it's so difficult and why it's so difficult for men to move. And we want to understand and help them to have a better autonomy, to have access to education, to employment, and so on. So the work that we are doing in Shanghai, when we have a national award system, annual system, and we have also the same thing in Latin America. So very narrow approach, local mobility issues, and we want to improve the knowledge in terms of mobility and have a broad access in terms of knowledge and mobility issues.
Are there any lessons, are there any techniques that you can apply in all countries, or do you have to treat every country and every city as individuals?
We have an example that we have started in Buenos Aires, and even the case here in Rio. When you step in a bus in Rio, you don't know where you go. You don't have any access in terms of information, what is the number of the line, what are the stops. And so in Buenos Aires, we have launched a very small project when we have just put stickers on certain buses, just to give the information to the people in the bus where they can change, where they can stop, and all the connection they can have in the cities. So we, over the 40 lines of buses in Buenos Aires, we have made the test only on 3 lines, and we had a very good response on that. And people here in Brazil, in Porto Alegre, or in Lima, or in other places in Latin America, are very kind to and keen to work with us because we just want to provide the best information to the people, as I said before, to make them more autonomous in terms of mobility. So just to bring the right information at the right time for a certain type of people.
And tell me a bit more about the way you work in cities. When you focus on mobility, is it just about transport, or are there other factors, other partnerships involved as well?
But clearly, the example I have given on the bus lines in Buenos Aires, we have worked with design agencies, we have worked with the local authorities, we have worked with the bus line operators, and clearly it was this very small and narrow project, but very efficient in terms of solutions that clearly this is the key and the way how we work with IVM. And so what we want to do is to make this kind of information more viable in the world. And so the key things we want to improve the mobility is to make people more able to move safely. What I mean is that here in Rio, it's very difficult to be autonomous. We need to improve the networks. It's not only a question of system or of pipes. You need to address clearly the needs of the people to move. Why? And it's a case also in Europe. More and more people are working during the night. You have no public transport during the night. What can you do to improve that? It's the same here in Rio. So clearly, just to go back from the position that old people have already on mobility, just to focus on commuting between 8 to 10 and 5 to 7, but just to address all the needs and just to really understand why people have to move from A to B and come back. So clearly what the key message that we have is that mobility is not only a question of transport, it's a question of way of life, it's a question of human needs. And so if you want to improve the mobility of people, you have to understand why people have to move and just to make them more able to move autonomously.
Is it also a question of redesigning cities? Because many cities have been designed for the automobile, particularly from my experience in the UK, when you have many big shopping centres outside cities which forces people to drive there and they cannot walk to the shops. So is there an aspect of that interests you and that you are working towards as well?
We are really interested in this kind of issue. We have not specific project on that, but what we need to understand and recognize is that cities have not been designed by the use of the car. Cars and the use of cars have helped people to move outside the inner cities, to have access to their own dwelling, and it was their own choice. It was a choice of the society, and it's very difficult to go against that. But clearly, by only focusing on the use of private cars, not proposing to large number of people public transport and efficient public transport, then people have no solution. If they want to be autonomous in the urban areas, they need to have a car and they need to drive the car. And clearly the key problem that we have all over the world with the urban sprawling is the fact that without a car, you don't live. And clearly it's not the problem of the use of the car, it's the problem of what is the choice that as a society we have made. And so if we want to reduce the use of the car, we have to propose something else. We have to think about why people need to go to the mall, as you said, because they don't have access to large shopping areas in their vicinities. So clearly, if we want to improve the mobility issues, we need to think on the whole of everything about where do people live, where do they work, where do they have access to leisure, and it's clearly a systematic view that we need to put on the table if we want to improve the mobility. And clearly here in Rio, clearly there is the landscape, the territory, which is quite complicated compared to others, but clearly it's the public transport clearly need to be improved, but also why people have to live in certain areas and work in other areas and just commute a long distance. Clearly, if we want to improve the mobility, we need to think on the whole thing, and we need to locate leisures, cultures, education, and employment close to where the people live.
How hard is it to get politicians and I guess people who make decisions at the highest level to maybe change their mentality? Because often if there is a transport problem in a city, the answer of the politicians is to say, I will provide 100 more buses on the streets by next week. How hard is it to change that mentality and to make them think perhaps of other more subtle conclusions or solutions?
We are very pragmatic. Our role as a non-profit organization is not to have a direct contact with all the mayors in the major cities and so on. It's just to find municipalities, local authorities that are interested to improve the way how public transport and also private transport works. And so with the project that we have in Buenos Aires, and we want to spread all over the world, which is called Legible Cities, we just want to make people aware that today the cities are not legible. We have plenty of signs in the cities, but most of the time they are not relevant. And so they need to think twice or third time of what is the right information and what is the right time. And so if they want to improve, as I said before, their mobility issues, they want to think on the whole issue. And so then it's difficult, it's hard, it's not as easy as you said, as putting more than one bus on the road. You have to just go to in Rio. When you look at a bus, you have plenty of signs, and you don't know where it's going. You don't know what is the price. You don't know what kind of interconnection you can have. And so people, if we want them to use the public transport, we need to improve the information and not think about the information only in terms of system, but in terms of usage. And clearly the main point that we have to local authorities and to mayors is just to think about mobilities in terms of usage and not in terms of only on transport issues and pipelines and so on.
Okay, and a final question. Obviously, we're here for the Sustainable Development Summit. In terms of the text that is being negotiated at the moment, what would you like to see in it with regards to mobility? What thoughts would you have in that regard?
Clearly, in fact, mobility is linked to urban dwelling, and so with people being more and more living in cities, mobility is going to increase, and you cannot stop it because, as I said, mobility is the access to education, to employment, and so if we want to have a more sustainable world, we need to think in terms of mobility to reduce the impacts on the environment. We need to look at other possibilities as the car sharing, carpooling. We need to have cars that are more efficient in terms of energy, with hybrid, maybe electric cars, and also we have 10 years ago as IVM we have stated the fact that mobility is a right. So now it's clearly on the agenda. Clearly, our thinking now and our thought is that tomorrow mobility will be a choice. It's people who should have the choice to move, to take the public transport, to take their car, to go on foot, and if they don't have the choice, they will still use their private car. So if we want to have a more sustainable world in terms of mobility, we need to offer to the vast majority of people the choice of their mode for moving.